Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuhu. This is the Practical Tawheed series, and we're trying to only make maybe 20-minute clips. We're trying to keep the clips short as possible because we want people to get the principle down pat. And today we're still going over the issue of the ingredients of ibadah. We're still going over the ingredients of ibadah, of worship. And so far we understood that we're going over the book, The Meaning of La ilaha illallah by Sheikh Ahmed Milibari from the Milibar region of India. And the Sheikh, those scholars in that region, they have their own school of thought about what's actually worship and what's not. So far we went over the issue of divinity, which is the main ingredient of worship. And underneath that comes fear, love, and hope. And those ingredients together causing an act to go into being an act of worship. Those ingredients can be applied to other than Allah. It still will be called worship, but it'll be polytheism or paganism or shirk, what we call in Arabic. So, and how do we know that? Because we know that Allah used the word worship for the actions of the disbelievers toward their false deities. As Allah said in Surah Al-Kafirun, He said, "La a'budu ma ta'budun." I worship not that which you worship, nor will you worship that which I worship. So from that, we clearly see that Allah used the word worship for the action of the disbelievers toward their false deities. And according to the school of thought of Ahmed Milibad and the scholars of that region of India and Pakistan, that word has a meaning to it and a connotation to it, which is that it has to be an act done, believing the thing to be divine with fear, love, and hope, and that will make that act worship. The problem is that those ingredients cannot be applied to accept Allah. When those ingredients are applied to other than Allah, then we fall into the greatest of sin when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Inna shirka madhumun azim." That verily shirk is the worst of oppressions. So is the greatest oppression is to give these ingredients or give these principles and apply them to other than the one who created you, who doesn't deserve divinity, and the one who doesn't deserve fear, love, and hope to be applied to it, believing that it's divine when Allah is the only one who is divine. And this is the foundational meaning of La ilaha illallah. When somebody says La ilaha illallah, they're negating those ingredients from other than Allah and affirming them only for Allah. This is how Sheikh Ahmed Milibari and the scholars from his region explain La ilaha illallah. So we go in. So why did Allah call the action of the disbelievers and the believers worship in these verses? So know that worship carries a specific meaning, that an action are done with a belief, whether actions of the heart or the limbs. And these are just some of my notes that I got from Sheikh Muqsin Maluk that I'm just adding on to the statements of Ahmed Milibad, because we're going to go back to his book, obviously, in the next class. We're going to go back because now he's going to go into explaining those who say that La ilaha illallah means none has right to be obeyed but Allah. We're going to go into refuting that false claim of the Khawarij and the Qutbiyin, like the Ikhwani Muslimin and other than them, who say that La ilaha illallah means none has the right to be obeyed but Allah. So he goes in and he mentions, what is the belief that one has to make something worship? Because obviously we see that Allah said in Surah Al-Kafirun that He called the actions of the non-Muslims toward their false deities worship. He called it that. Allah called it that. And He also called we do worship. But what's the difference? The belief is to believe in the heart and to do an action, believing that this person or thing being called upon with this action has the abilities that resemble the attributes of lordship. Ta'li, in English we will say making something divine, making something a deity, divine abilities without limitations or deficiencies. And the reason I'm driving this principle home, because we have to understand that if you're dealing with people who are not Muslim, whether they're Christians or Jews or Buddhists, their belief that they have for their God isn't the difference. It's the same thing that we have for Allah. The problem is it comes in when they apply ingredients of worship to other than Allah. That's the problem. It's not that they don't believe in Allah, because Christians do. They believe in that there's one Alpha God. He created everything. They call Him Father God, who is Allah. The problem is they say that other than Allah has divine attributes and qualities or divine themselves. That's where the problem comes in. They believe that others other than Allah has the right to be prayed to or sacrifice to or worship other than the one who created them. That's where the problem comes in. Not that they don't believe in Allah. Because most human beings accept the fact there's an alpha God. There's a one God who's over everybody. But the problem comes in when they break things down into demigods and smaller gods. Okay? This is where the problem comes in at. The problem comes in that this is a God now, this is one, and that's one. You have a sun God now. You have this type of God. You have the Trinity. Not only Christians believe in the Trinity, Buddhists have a Trinity. Hindus have a Trinity. The ancient Egyptians had one. So the Trinity is not something only specific to Christians. Also, it's not specific to them that they say the law has a son. That's not specific only to Christians either. A lot of different religions say the same thing. So he says the ability to, one of the acts of divinity, the ability to control, create, and change the affairs of the unseen in a way that cannot be perceived, as it wills and wants. Also, the affairs of the seen, the things that can be perceived by the five senses. Right? What we call in Arabic asbab al-hassiyya. The issue, again, we say again, there are things that inhumanly possible that we can't do. That is control the cause and effect of the universe. The unseen movements that happen that make other things happen. That's controlled by one. And when you believe that somebody other than that one, who is Allah, has the ability now to control those unseen causes and effect and to bring about what you want when you ask for, this is now making something a partner with God. This is what paganism is to believe that more than one has those abilities. That is the plain out reality of what paganism is. And that's what we got to get back to. We have made religion hard. We have made it into a bunch of dogma. We have made it into a bunch of terminologies where it's very simple. It's a very simple arithmetic to it. There's God and there's creation. If you believe that creation has any attributes or anything that resembles God in anything or Allah in anything, then you are a pagan. That's plain out simple. If you don't, and you believe that only Allah possesses divinity, then you're a monotheist. That is the reality. No, well, we don't worship the Prophet Muhammad, and any Muslim who does that is not a Muslim anymore. For example, you have Sufi sects or Shiite sects that may pray to Ali, or they may pray to the Prophet Muhammad's grave and stuff like that. These people are considered not to be Muslim anymore. So exactly, if praying to Jesus the same as praying to the Prophet Muhammad, neither one of them deserves worship. Neither one of them, not the Prophet Muhammad or not the Prophet Jesus, not Prophet Moses. None of them deserve to be prayed to because they themselves prayed. They themselves had to submit to the one who created them. They themselves had human characteristics. They ate. They got scared. They could be injured. They were born, so they don't have the right to be worshipped. Any Muslim who prays to the Prophet Muhammad, he leaves the fold of Islam. And generally speaking, any Muslim who thinks that the Prophet Muhammad can hear him in his grave and answer his prayers, then he's no different than somebody who prays to Jesus Christ. He's no different. So he says, so the created things around us that we used that can be smelled, touched, seen, taste, heard, or bring benefit or harm, communicating with each other. The cause and effects are the things around you that you can bring about a change on your human level. For example, I can smell, I can touch, I can see, I can walk. If I want water, I can go get some. All of those things are a created box that you're in, and it's controlled by somebody. That's the issue. And when you believe that now somebody has the ability to make those things react and move about without any type of effort, or being confined into those confines and bring about what it wants. You can't prevent it from bringing about what it wants, and you can't make it do what you want. That's a God. And the fact that somebody believes that about other than Allah, this person is not a monotheist. He's not a monotheist. I don't care if he calls himself Muslim. I don't care if he uses the name Islam. Because the reality is Islam has a meaning. Submitting to the one creator, with actions of obedience. And that's the bottom line. If you're not doing that and you're putting those actions of obedience with the ingredients of worship to other than the one who created you, then you are not a Muslim, even if you call yourself that. So B, ability to create. The ability to create. Now, here's a question. Allah says in the Quran, He's ahsanul khaliqeen. Allah says He's the best of creators. He mentions the plural form of the word creator. Does that mean there's other creators other than God? How do we explain that? Now, the ability to create, meaning to create from nothing. That's what it means. Allah is the only one who can create from nothing. The human being cannot create something from nothing. He has to use created things that he already has access to put them together to make something else. He cannot take something, nothing, and make it something. He has to take created things around him. Make a car, he needs rubber, he needs sand to make glass, he needs metal, he needs electric, he needs wiring. Things is already there for him to put something else together. Right? That's all he does. But Allah, the creator, doesn't need that. He can make something, and the proof is, you look at scientists, for example, they're still finding things. They're still looking in the universe and finding planets forming together. They're still finding species. Some of them even said that some of this, they even seen species actually growing and creating themselves, or becoming created, or becoming from nothing. They still can't explain that. How now there's species popping up all over the place. When the farther they go into the ocean, they find new species, things that we've never seen before. Allah keeps creating. But the human being cannot create, not without other materials. The ability to change the cause and effect of life and death and birth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bring life and death. Now you can say, well, I can too. I can shoot somebody in the head. I can do this, I can do that. But no, you can't decree for somebody to live or die. And on top of that, even if you shoot somebody in the head, doesn't mean he's going to die. So if I stab somebody, if I beat somebody with a bat and I intend to kill him, if it's not decreed for that person to die, they won't die, no matter how much I try to kill them. I don't have control over life and death. I'm part of the reasons that somebody dies. I'm part of the will that comes about. If it's decreed for somebody to die, you stabbing them is part of the whole process of them leaving this earth, of their soul leaving their body. You're not the one that caused the soul to leave the earth, the body. And somebody coming back to life, we can't do that. We can be part of the process that somebody may heal and come back. Like somebody's dying, use the things to shock their chest, CPR, medicine. You're part of the will, the process of bringing someone back to healing or bringing them back to their state. You're not the one who brings them back to their state. You're just part of the process, like medicine or like CPR or anything else. You're part of the whole process of the created means that goes around the cause and effect that makes something happen. This is how we got to explain Tawheed. Because Allah is the one controlling those cause and effects, like a domino. He's controlling it. This hits that, that hits that, and it brings about what you want. D, to believe that it has total perfection, no deficiencies in the least, and cannot be perceived. To believe that something has total perfection, no deficiencies, right? And cannot be perceived by your five senses. You can't figure it out. It leaves you bedazzled. That's a God. And the fact that there are human beings that believe that about other than Allah, then this is what paganism is. And monotheism is the opposite of that. That you only believe that one possesses those qualities, and that's Allah. To believe that about other than Allah, this is what we call paganism. Now, point 4. Fearing the person or thing that you are worshiping, believing that it has the above characteristics. Now we're getting back to the ingredients. Fearing something because it has those characteristics of divinity that we mentioned just now before. Right? They change the cause of life and death, birth, the ability to create, no deficiencies, total perfection. Can't be perceived by the five senses. To now base your fear based upon those attributes and those qualities, this type of fear will be worship. Not every fear is worship. Now you hear human beings say, I'm not scared of anything. That's not true. I'm scared of a lion. I'm scared of a pit bull. I'm scared of a great white. I'm scared of those things. If I'm in the water with it, I'm afraid of it. But does that mean I'm worshiping the shark now? Or the dog or the lion? No. That's natural inclination towards fear. And the reason it's not worship, because I know that I may have a way out of that thing's harm. A shark, it doesn't necessarily just come in the water with it that it's going to actually kill me. I can get away from it. You can hit it in the nose. You can shoot it with a harpoon gun. You can get away from it. You can get on the boat. It doesn't have the ability of total control and perfection that it can get you whenever it wants and how it wants. It doesn't have that ability. Neither is a lion. Neither is a pit bull. Neither is somebody with a gun. Neither is somebody who wants to kill you. None of them. They're all limited to what they can do to you. But now, to fear something, believing that it has the ability to get you and to trap you and to harm you anytime, anywhere, without any deficiency, without being limited at all, this type of affair is only given to Allah. The problem is human beings give it to the Prophet Muhammad. Some human beings do. Some human beings give it to the Prophet Jesus. Some human beings give it to the Prophet Moses. Some give it to Buddha. Some give it to the Hindu gods, the sun, the moon, the stars. They do that. Dead people in the grave. I mean, something as simple as, in America, our people, they do stuff like this. They'll say, oh man, my mother's watching over me. How is that? You're giving your mother divine qualities now, that she can watch over you from the unseen. We don't think about that though. Or somebody says they found money on the ground. They say, oh, my grandmother knew I needed that money. Thanks, grandma. That's paganism. Because they don't have that ability to know you needed $20. They don't have the ability to bring that about. Now you're giving them quality. And this is all pagan religions. After somebody who they love died, all of a sudden they're divine. The Shiite did it with the prophet's grandchildren. The Christians did it with Jesus. We don't believe he died. Obviously Muslims, we don't believe he was crucified, but that's another story. But the Christians do. They loved him. He died. They made him a god. The Buddhists, they made Buddha a god. It's in every pagan religion. All of them say when somebody righteous dies, they make him what? A god. So now, it says, for example, he said, if a person, he said, this is the type of fear is two types of fear. The fear we just mentioned is the fear that you may have for some of creation, like a dog or a lion chasing you, or the fear of your parents being angry with you. So our fear for creation is based upon knowledge that their ability to harm us is perceivable by the five senses and limited to their created abilities. Right? Now, if a person wanted to harm us, he or she would have to use their hands or weapon, then come towards us exerting energy to strike at us. All of these things are created objects. So he or she is limited in their ability to harm us according to the laws of creation. So that Allah has created and established, meaning their harm can be perceived by creation, which are called the asbab hassiyya, reasons that are perceived by the five senses. This is fear that we know. So, and he says type 2, the type 2 fear. This is the fear that is considered worship. Listen to the difference. Worship to fear something or someone, believing that it can bring about harm in an unseen way that cannot be perceived nor prevented. This is called khawfa ta'lih. This is what we call it in Arabic, right? Fearing harm that cannot be prevented without limitations or deficiencies. This is worship. Believing something can harm you and you can't stop it. This is paganism. If it's for Allah, it's monotheism. If it's for other than Allah, then what's what we call paganism. For example, if we were in Philadelphia and there is a man in China and we fear disobeying him, believing that if we don't obey his commands, he will see and hear us in a way that cannot be perceived without using created means of hearing and seeing, such as having wiretaps in our homes, to listen to us on camera, to see us. Rather, we believe that he is not in need of creation to know our fears, and that he goes beyond the laws of creation to punish us for our disobedience of him. This person has been given ta'li, divinity, divine attributes that are divine in nature. This is the reality. You hear the difference? Somebody's in China. He tells you to, let's say, walk around your house 7 times, for example, something like that. Now, or he tells you to pray, right? Now, you pray believing that now he's going to be able to see you and know you didn't pray without wiretaps, without cameras, without cell phones, without nothing to know that what you're doing. He can know what you're doing at all times without created means. Now he's going to bring about a punishment to you for not praying, and you can't prevent it. And it's without limit or deficiencies, and that you cannot prevent their harm from coming upon you. You believe this person is a God, and you have made a partner with Allah. This is the difference between us, the Muslims, and non-Muslims, right down the middle. Because we have to understand exactly what worship is. Because if not, we're going to call everything worship. Somebody watch TV, that's worship. Somebody smoke a cigarette, that's worship. I mean, you should hear some of the stuff people say is worship nowadays. You obey somebody in sin, you're worshiping them. This stuff leads to takfir. It leads to saying somebody's not Muslim. Eventually, that's what it leads to. Every group you see of takfir you see today, they started off doing what? Everybody's a sinner, everybody's a deviant, and then they eventually started saying what? Oh, now if you sin, you're not a Muslim anymore. And why? Because they equated worship with obedience only. If you obey somebody other than Allah, now you're not a Muslim anymore. And we're going to get into Sheikh Ahmed Milli Badi's reply to those who say that La ilaha illallah means to obey other than Allah. This is a false belief. People can obey other than Allah and still be Muslim. How? Adam alayhi salam. Did he not obey other than Allah? Adam alayhi salam. Did he not obey other than Allah? Did not the Sahaba who drink alcohol and the Prophet alayhi salam lashed him? Did he not obey other than Allah? Did he not obey his desires? Did he not obey other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But yet still, it wasn't considered worship. We got to think. So, this type of affair is only legislated for Allah. And if it is given to other than Allah, it is major polytheism and removes one from the religion. Now, so in closing, we have learned what worship is, right? And we know the Prophet ﷺ, he said, well, here we say worship is that Allah is the only who has attributes of lordship, purely divine actions. Qudra ilhiyya, divine abilities without limitations or deficiencies. And he is to be made dua to, supplication to alone without partners. Now, what is dua? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, dua huwa al-ibadah. Supplication is worship. And Allah said in Surah Al-Ghafir, and your Lord said, invoke me and ask me for anything. I will respond to your invocation. Verily, those who scorn my worship, they will surely enter hell in humiliation. Surah Al-Ghafir, verse 60. Now we learn from these texts that the Prophet ﷺ and Allah and his messenger made supplication and worship be interchangeable. Why? There are two types of supplication before we get into these subcategories, right? Every other branch of supplication stems from whether it is dua ibadah or mas'ala, whether it's dua of worship or dua of asking. The foundation must be known first before these divisions can be learned. The problem is we learn subdivisions of things before we learn the asl of things. And this gets us tricked up because dua has a linguistic meaning and it has a legislated meaning. So dua mas'ala and dua ibadah come along with the what? They come along with the what? Legislated meaning. But linguistic also can be into the linguistic meaning. And we'll see. Now, the type one is the meaning in the language. And we don't want to keep this too long. It is the meaning in the language. Supplication has a meaning in the Arabic language, which is to seek or request something from someone or something. Right? We can call upon the creation according to their abilities to respond to us. If we were to call a friend to our home to help lift a heavy object, we know that he or she is able to answer our call because they heard the call to them in the limitations set by Allah. What? The created, the asbab hissiyya, the created things around us that we use, which in this case is sound. Because our friend is created and must be able to hear the call, either being close enough to hear us, hear our voice, by way of telephone, internet, email, or by any other means of communication used by creation, which we understand or perceive. So now that this is a form of supplication, but it is not worship, because you are not giving them the abilities that resemble the abilities of lordship, being purely divine in nature. This is what we have to understand. Why isn't the first type of dua or the first type of supplication linguistically isn't worship? Because Sheikh Ahmed Milli Badi, as he clearly explained, the core is missing that makes it worship. What is that core? That core is to seek or to ask upon you believing that thing to be divine. That's missing from that call. You understand that to creation you're asking for something is limited to their response, to the created cause and effect that keep them boxed in. The created box that we live in, that we only can work within it. But there's someone controlling that box, controlling the moves and the cause and effect of that box. And that's Allah. Because it is not worship because you are not giving them the ability that resemble the abilities of lordship, being purely divine in nature. Knowing that they have to work within the laws of creation set by Allah to aid you. He or she has to bend their legs, back, exert energy to lift this heavy object. These are limited abilities of creation. And this is why it's not worship, because you're not worshiping them. You don't believe they have the right to be worshipped. This is why divinity is important. We understand this. Most of us skip right over divinity. Most of them, you go to any masjid where they're teaching about Tawheed, they skip right over it. They don't even spend time on the issue of Ta'li and Ilhiya. They skip right over it. But it is the source of what makes something worship. It is the main ingredient. Without it, the cookies don't taste good. Without it, the cake is flat. It has to be there. But we skip over it as if it is not important. That's a problem. Type 2 is the legislated meaning, which is when supplication, dua, becomes worship. It is to supplicate to something or someone, believing in the heart that what you are calling upon has abilities of lordship, being purely divine in nature. That's the reality. That type of supplication is worship. When you believe that the thing you're calling upon, that its attributes and its actions and its response to you is purely divine in nature, this will make it worship, which are to create, control the affairs of the unseen in a way that we cannot perceive, nor can it be explained, causing events to happen in such a way that is divine in nature, controlling, changing, and creating the laws of creation, the asbab hissiyya, the created means around us that we use to bring about what was requested in an unseen, divine way. This is worship. And that's all it is. It's simple. So, also fearing what you are calling upon, believing that if you don't make supplication to it, it has the ability to harm you in an unseen divine way that we cannot perceive with our senses, nor can we perceive how it goes beyond the created means to bring about harm or benefit, or to give a reward in the unseen divine way that we cannot perceive. Also, this second type, we'll stop here. This second type of supplication is only to be given to Allah. And if it's given to other than Allah, then this person is a mushrik, a pagan, and remains in the hellfire forever. As was said by the Prophet ﷺ, whoever dies making a partner with Allah, then he enters the hellfire. As it came in Bukhari, meaning whoever supplicates to someone other than Allah, giving them abilities that resemble his abilities, which are divine in nature, upon this belief that was mentioned, then he or she deserves to enter the hellfire, because shirk is to make dua, supplication, to other than Allah upon this belief that we has mentioned, as was said by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah in Usul al-Thalath, when he said dua, when he said ibadah, huwa dua li ghayrillah. When he said worship is to make dua to other than Allah. And then we're going to stop there, and we're going to get into the next thing is when you apply those 4 ingredients to other than Allah, something being divine, fearing it, loving it, and hope upon believing that it is divine. When you apply those principles or those ingredients other than Allah, what is that thing called? It is called a Tawheed. We're going to get into the meaning known to the school of thought of the scholars of Pakistan and India, that region. But we're going to mention that there are 2 positions known to Ahlul Sunnah. There's the Najd position, and there's the region of India and Pakistan. There are scholars like in the region of Milibar and places like that. They don't hold the same. They hold the same usul, meaning they believe that Tawheed is shaitan, anything worship other than Allah. Okay, but the issue comes in now. What's worship? Okay, the Najd school of thought, they don't believe that you have to believe something is divine to worship it. The school of thought of India and those regions believe that you have to believe something is divine to worship it. Okay, and that's the 2 school of thoughts. And what's a Tawheed and what goes underneath what's a Tawheed? They differ on some of those issues. But we're just going to really go into what the school of thought of the scholars of India, but that's the position that I hold. But there is 2 positions, and amongst Ahlul Sunnah, amongst the scholars of the Sunnah, about what goes underneath being a Tawheed. But we're not going to get into all those technical things, because we're just going to take one position, because we don't want to confuse everybody and stuff like that. So, and we're going to get into that, inshallah ta'ala. Barakallahu feek. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.